Every time that we do that, we have several things, not only that we do at church, not only meals that we do, but we spend time as a family doing communion. And maybe sometime I'll talk about that a little bit more, but it's just a really special time for us to get together. Welcome to the Leveraging Success Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Gerhardt. Every time that we get together, I want to help you work less, make more, and through the freedom that you gain and the margin that you store up, you're going to be able to use that to be an incredible husband, wife, parent, and most importantly, an incredible kingdom leader, living the life mission that God put you on. I'm so glad that we're here together right after Easter. I've spent a lot of time overseas in different places, and I've been able to spend time in places like Greece. And one of the things that they like to say is Christos aniste, and that word means he is risen. And the response back is always alitos aniste, and that is he is risen indeed. And those words mean so much to us because the fact that Jesus died wasn't just the point. The completion of the point was that he rose from the dead, just as he foretold, as the prophets foretold, and we are so grateful for that. I hope you had a wonderful Easter with your family. I know that every time that we do that, we have several things, not only that we do at church, not only meals that we do, but we spend time as a family doing communion. And maybe sometime I'll talk about that a little bit more, but it's just a really special time for us to get together. So I'm happy for you, and a belated happy Easter. Again, remembering every day that Jesus paid it all. With that in mind, we're after it today. He's the reason why we are operating the way that we are. And this work to do, as I'm promising you, to work less, means that we're trying to compact the amount of demand that's outside of the core of the thing God wants me to do. Now, being able to compact the demand that's coming at me, it's a challenge. And the challenge is really in what you say yes to. What you say yes to is going to create commitments, and all of those commitments start to stack up. Whether they're the big commitments or a bunch of small things, the next thing you know, you have no availability to the thing God made you for. So the more that we can compact that, we have freedom. And by that, we get this margin, this freedom that allows us to focus. So I want to deal with that today. I'm going to be talking to you more about how do you manage what you say yes to, and in that process, really create the freedom to stay on mission on the most important thing. The most important thing is to love God, love people, make disciples. All right, so I'll talk more about that as things come up. I just want to tell you that I had an amazing experience the weekend before last. We had not only a launch of a new cohort of the master's program, where we had a great dinner and a day's workshop, but we also had in the team from Mexico that's leading the master's program there. And it's fantastic. You just got to see what God is doing there. They were able to see how we run things, and for us to be in collaboration. It was just a special time. And there's some really just amazing people down there: Omar, Miguel, Gregorio, Jorge. There's multiple Jorges: Susie, Ceci, Ixtak, Facundo, Maggie, Joanna. I mean, I could go on and on for the people that are taking this, because they found this to be true. What's been so fun is to see marketplace leaders, people that are in business, they're business owners, executives, entrepreneurs. And as they do what we're talking about, that compacting of the demand on their life that's outside the core of the calling of their life, they're able to be extraordinary people, living an extraordinary process in a life that creates influence, where people say, hey, tell me more about this. How are you doing that? How come your family is like that? And that legitimacy, that life on display creates a sense of there has to be something that I can do to follow that. And that's what we're about here, is to unlock some of those secrets, to talk through what does it take to really make a life on purpose and keep that focus, right? Not just a momentary project. Some of you get to do amazing things like go down to Mexico and build houses, or do short-term missions into Africa or the Middle East. And every time that you're there, I bet you say this to yourself: I wish I did this all the time. But I have demand back home that it's calling me to do this. And so we get ourselves intertwined in so many other things that we have a week here, a day there, and some of these scraps. But all the time when we get to do these things, we're thinking, I want to do more of that. I want to invest more in that. And you start to sense that you're coming alive, doing the mission that our Father's looking for and the thing that we're best at. And when that gets to get matched up, the magic really happens. That's what we're after. So I want to talk to you about how do you get that done today. The news is where I'm going to go next. And every time that we get on this podcast, we want to bring you some news. And with that news, you start to think to yourself, okay, how does that impact the way that I think? Here's what's in the news. I want to tell you the Wall Street Journal on March 24th wrote an article called "They Choose to Take a Pay Cut and Say They're Happier." Now, I don't know if you're looking at this. It's not something that may surprise you, is that there are plenty in this generation that are saying to themselves, we watched the previous generation burn out and or spend so much time in their career that when they finally got their freedom or retired, they spent all of the rest of their life trying to make up for what they missed. They live with so much regret, and they've got all sorts of relational damage that happened as a result of a complete overcommitment in their career. And so there's a blowback to that. This blowback is what this article is bringing out. Some people in this that took pay cuts, and in that they say that they're getting freedom, that they're becoming their own bosses. Even though they still work for someone, they've got more control of their time. Can you imagine? And this is what they were discussing, is that they didn't have to be working on emails through the night. And once they were done with work at the end of their day, they stopped working. And the rest of that time was margin time, that was freedom time, a way to live a balanced life. Now, I have so many thoughts on this. You should read the article because it's got plenty of really good examples and very interesting things, but some comments that I want to make about this article. If you get a chance to read it, here's some of the thoughts that I would have. First of all, you can see that in the article, they say that roughly half of America would accept a 20% pay cut to get their freedom. Now, 20% pay cut, let's just equate that to time, right? 20% of your time back. If you could get a 20% pay cut, I would imagine then that I would get a whole day's worth of time back into my calendar, right? If I've got 5 days of work, so to speak, every week, and I was going to take a 20% pay cut, I would imagine, well, great. That means that I don't have to work on Friday, or I've got a 4-day week to work with. Now, what I opened this with, and it was just amazing that I found this article because I had already picked this as a topic for today's podcast. And this is really a follow-up to the podcast that I talked to you about last week, which was, what is my calling and how do I figure that out? Well, we're working then to make this into implementation. So I want to talk about this, looking at people who are saying, well, I'm really compressing the demand by changing the price scheme, right? I'm changing what I'm going to bring in income. Now, an interesting statement that was made to me about financial planners, right? Financial planners look at people of all sorts of spectrums, whether they're 5-figure, 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure. They see all levels of wealth. And when they look at them, what they realize is this: everyone starves at their own level. So it doesn't matter how much you're making. It's natural for whatever capacity that you've got or supply you've got in money, that the demand just keeps growing unless you change the game or you start to make some changes in the structure there. And it has not always been natural for our culture, our Western culture, to not want to consume, right? We're consumers by nature. We've set up a system where consumerism is encouraged and stimulated in all sorts of natural and unnatural ways. And so that just keeps consuming. And then I have a sense that I can never have enough. Well, if that line could get cut and I could say to myself, okay, this is what I'm going to eat. This is what the house is going to eat. This is the burden that I need to cover. And that's as far as it'll go. Then I can start to constrain and say, well, the work that I'm going to do is pay to that level. And then everything else is investable. Now, your opportunity with what could be invested with not only your time and your money is in kingdom ventures, is in business ventures, is in your family, and working to create an ecosystem where good things are happening in the way you create value in this world or your career. Good things can be happening with your spouse and your children, and great things can be happening in the kingdom with the way that you do that. But the compression of what you're eating or what you're spending helps to constrain what the demand is on what kind of job you need to take, and your ability to tell and create tell your boss or tell the company or tell your clients what's the price that's going to be for your time. And as you dial that, to continue to work to get your freedom. Now, I just want you to understand this. My wife and I had a talk about it because we constantly have requests coming in, all things that are in and of themselves good, not great, but good. And so I was just telling her what we have done to today is to strategize and fight for it. Strategize and fight for it. So we've got a vision and a clear understanding of where our greatest contribution's at. And as much as possible, every bit of supply that we've got in time is going to be assigned to our greatest contribution. And sure, if we've got extra, we might consider assigning that to a good, not great thing, because certainly we don't want to just let the supply go to the wayside. Understanding when we're thinking of the supply of time, we also want to think about Sabbath time, refreshing, prep time, buffer time, and the focus time of delivering that value. So as we look at it, it's always intentional with the time. And the more that I'm intentional with my time, the more the outcomes are going to be what I'm expecting. But there's two forces that are behind this article that I want to call out to you. One has to do with the Industrial Revolution, and one is the flow of culture. I've hinted a little bit at the flow of culture and the consumerism, but the flow of culture says there isn't anything better. And so I won't demand better. And so it's just normal because I don't see other examples around me. This is why I would want you to read that article, because as you read this article, what you're going to be able to find is examples, real world examples, albeit maybe examples that are not at the same income level you are or place where you're at in career. But the more that we can experience reality of people who are really doing this, the more that comes into picture. It becomes real. This is possible that you could work less and make more. Now, that's the two things. One thing, the Industrial Revolution. The second thing, the culture. I talked about the second thing first. The culture is telling you this is the way it is. It's the only way it is. You don't have a choice. Just work like crazy, or do what used to happen at my old corporate job, right? Which was, who could send the email last? Who could pretend like they were still working? Who could set up an email to be sent at 2 a.m. or lay in their bed and fall asleep cuddling that laptop that that for me, it was the Lenovo ThinkPad, that black laptop. You're cuddling that thing all through the night and don't realize that you're typing all sorts of things as you've been rolling around in the bed. Or do what I did, right, in my corporate life, which is you fall asleep on the phone in meetings at midnight plus. Things like that happen really normally because the desire to go get it in the fight to achieve is that there's nothing I won't sacrifice in the name of this career. And so we spend up everything, and this becomes the cultural norm. And perhaps the company you work for, the one you lead, the company you've created has that culture because you've been the example of that culture, which is there's no place you can't reach me, even if I'm in the bathroom or even if I'm on the beach, supposed to be on vacation, you can reach me anytime, right? So all of that cultural norm has been happening and only accelerating really until recently. And we could certainly point to COVID and say, yeah, that was a period of time where things started to change and some of these things naturally had to create other opportunities for working from home and such. But this has been a trend for many years, and it goes back to the first thing that I told you, and it's the Industrial Revolution. So you're feeling the press of culture in you, and you've got the Industrial Revolution as a guide to what the timeframes are that you should work. Now, what does that mean? It means that through the time period with which we were having so many manufacturing jobs, and of course my fathers and my fathers and my father's fathers generations were very much factory focused. There was less white collar jobs, a lot more blue collar, and that mindset was I show up at 8, I clock in, I clock out for the break in the morning, clock out at lunch, clock out afternoon break, clock out at 5, and I go home. And so by that, it created the standard 40-hour work week. Of course, our French friends, they've found a way to get that into 4 days. But for most of the rest of the Western world, it was in 5 days. And so that expectation is that I'm not productive. I'm not going to be able to survive. I won't be able to eat unless I continue to clock in, clock out, and imagine at least at the base level that it takes me 40 hours to get food on the table and a roof over our heads and maybe a little bit extra. And so that as a foundation started to influence the way that work worked. Now, work hasn't always worked that way. And what we've been after, and it doesn't matter whether you were the farmer or the tradesman, prior to the Industrial Revolution, it wasn't about how much can I work, but what would it take to get it done? And now here we are in a world where technology is accelerating. And as that happens, you've never had a better moment to break out of the traditional mold, perhaps even put yourself in a place with which you can negotiate with your existing company or arrange the way that your existing company works so that you can get your freedom and that it doesn't have a requirement of time or presence. Now, the way that I coach everybody and I talk about this is that you never want to exchange time or, if you can, also not presence for money. Because when you're trading time and presence for money, it means that you're going to be stuck with you as the supply. But if value is what you're trading for money, then it doesn't matter whether the work took you 1 minute or 1,000 days, you're just delivering to the value that you agreed upon. And so the more that we can get into those value-based agreements, the more that we can work towards true freedom. Here's a story. I had a colleague for many years, good friend, that was always looking to hack the system. And the way that he worked was that he wanted to be able to come and go as he pleased. Now, he was plenty productive. He was able to get the job done. And frankly, he was very smart. But the way that he hacked the system, and this is almost 20 years ago, but the way that he hacked the system was he'd eat a half of a sandwich. He'd put it on his desk. And then in our offices, all of the lights were turned on and off by motion sensors. So he got a toy on his desk that would move back and forth. And while it waved to keep the lights on, it made it look like he's not there. There's a sandwich here and the lights are on, but he's not here. So he must be in a meeting somewhere on campus. Of course, that wasn't true. But that game, that approach was the mindset to say, look, you don't need me here all the time. You don't need me here just pretending to go through the motions or waiting for the next email to come in, but rather I want to be in an exchange of values so that I can get my freedom. And the more that I do that, the more the opportunity for me to go after it. Now, I want to help you as you look at one side of the equation, which is I'm compressing the demand. I'm working to get my freedom. And some of that compression of the demand is how much do I need to eat? And if I can lower that, then the burden there can be an opportunity to get margin. And then to be able to look at my own commitments and work to only exchange value for money, not time or presence for money. Otherwise, the culture and the way that we've always worked continue to make the norm of a life that's lived by default, sort of just floating down the river, thinking, I hope I end up somewhere better, but we never do. So you're going to have to fight for this, to fight to get this margin to appear. But we do that with a vision for what could be, and then move towards that end. Okay, here's what I said I was going to talk about today. And that Wall Street Journal article from March 24th, 2024 is a great way for you to get some more vision for ideas for what could be. Now, I want to take you into managing what you say yes to, being people that are skilled, capable, frankly, fantastic, and you've figured a lot of things out in your success. And because of that, there are plenty of people that want you to apply that to their own context. That can be under their leadership or some program that they want you to be a part of. And so everyone's looking for soldiers and managers. I want to pose to you that we don't need more soldiers and managers. We need more great leaders. There's too few great leaders in the kingdom. And that's why I speak to you. Because you're successful. You've proven that success in other places. So for you to rise up as a leader, being a leader is going to say yes with a focused yes. It's going to aim what it signs up for to say, okay, this is who I am. This is who God has called me to be. And as I've identified that, then I know the supply and capability, and I want to sell that. I want to get the demand connected to that supply so that the more that I can be occupied in the thing that I was made for, the thing that's going to matter forever. And that's just a question for you today, is how much of what you're going to spend today on will matter forever. Okay, knowing that and your appetite for how much more do you want, you're now wanting to make sure that what you're saying yes to is going to have a high yield on it. How much yield will you have in your work? It may have some. It certainly provides for the house, but how much is enough? And making sure the house gets what it needs and that your children, your spouse, your family, the home is growing and doing well. Well, I've been telling you throughout this discussion today that we need to be able to manage that yes. And one side of that is to say yes to the thing that is going to fulfill the thing I'm best at. But the other part of this is to start to continue to vine dress or weed whack back the things that are not inside that calling. So how do weed whack and push back on that? Well, it comes through the things that I call the 3 Ne's. And these 3 Ne's are important. And I coach this with both with executives and business leaders and with ministry leaders, because everyone has the same problem. By the way, I don't really like that term, business leader, ministry leader. It seems like those should be or are two different things, but I really mean people that are in a for-profit life and others that are in a donor-provided life. We'll leave it in those contexts, but the thing I talk about are the 3 Ne's. They are neglect, negotiate, and negate. Now, those 3 Ne's are important, but the one that always gets people a little bit like, whoa, hey, what are you talking about here? Neglect. Yeah, neglect. Here's what you've got to understand is that if everything's important, nothing's important. And your leadership must go at the speed with which the organization you lead can tolerate the amount of disappointment that you're going to put into place. You're going to continue to expect that as you have decisions to make, you're going to say yes to things. That means there were other things that you said no to. And if I'm going to neglect it, it means that my yes says that there's some things that I'm not even going to pay attention to because it's not the most important thing. What does that look like? Well, it may start off with looking at emails and saying, I'm not going to respond to that email. It's going to sit there for a while, and I'm going to hope or see if it still exists in a week or two. And if it's still there and I'm still the only person and it's truly urgent, maybe, not certainly, maybe I'll let it go. As very capable people, everyone wants to treat you like Google. They think they can send an email and say, tell me the answer to this. And so you get to decide, am I going to be the tennis player that is always the constant returner and make sure that anything that comes in that box that I'm responsible for? I've known executives, high-powered executives, that believed one of their key performance indicators was could they go home with no emails unread and responded to every night, which is ridiculous. That's not leadership. That's offering a consultancy inside of a business. And who knows how much value that really creates for you and for me. We need to start neglecting some things that are coming into the inbox and let them stay there and see if they don't take care of themselves. There may be things on your calendar that you need to neglect and say, hey, I know you guys have got this. I'm not going to be there. Let me know send me the notes and let me know if there's anything urgent would relate to the most important thing. Neglect is one tool. Negate. Negate is to say, hey, there's some agreements that I probably have dreamed up that I am obligated to. I think that we won't survive if I don't, or I think I must do this. And so many of those musts, I need to categorize them and make sure they're truly must to the important thing. Because if they're should-haves or could-haves, then they need to be negated. If they're just should do's or could do's, they need to be negated. I want to be on the must do's, and the must do's are the things that are aligned to the most important things. So I'm going to look as the landscaper of my time. I'm going to look to make this yard look super clean. I'm going to say this needs to be cut out. I need to get rid of the shoulds and coulds and make sure that it's only the musts and the want tos that are aligned to the most important thing. Neglect, negate, finally negotiate. Now, through this process, especially if you've come up with some shoulds and coulds, you may need to work with some other people to renegotiate the expectations. But what you have to understand is that no one is hoping, unless you're working with someone diabolical, and so few of us actually have that really going on, that everyone hopes that everyone is enjoying what they're doing and not in a place where I'm doing well and you're not. And when we go back to these things and say, here's some shoulds and coulds, let's box those up and either say, hey, I need to put this into a better scenario. I'm gonna delegate this to you. I'm gonna give you the opportunity. Or together, can we renegotiate how often we meet on this topic? Or could we negotiate when we're gonna be in the office and when we're gonna work from home? There's so many things that we can work into win-wins, ones that everyone will be, hey, I'm still winning, you're winning, we're creating opportunities, and not leaving it to, well, there's no way I could go back and change these dynamics. All the time, the leader must keep the tools of neglect, negate, and negotiate. And at least, I would say once a quarter, at least every 90 days, take those three tools out and say, okay, we got to clean this yard up. We got to trim it up and make sure that all the weeds are batted back. And what gets left is the thing that's beautiful, the thing that we were made for. Now, you've got to manage these things, the things that you say yes to. And leading in them isn't to leave it to someone else or hoping that it's going to get better. It's to decide every day incrementally that I'm managing the demand on me to make sure that it comes out with the most important things. And the big question always is, what I'm doing today going to matter forever? And how many days will you tolerate the answer to being low to no eternal value? How many days will you tolerate that? I had an old boss who I love. She used to say, you get what you expect and you deserve what you tolerate. And I really believe that. If you expect this outcome, you're going to get it. And if you tolerate this behavior in yourself, it's going to give you something you deserve. So what do you want? What's the outcome that you want to go for? What is the vision that you've got that would lead you to say, my work should have an eternal echo, one that will be mattering forever? Hey, I thank you for being here. Every time that we get together and talk like this, it's an opportunity. And being on this journey is one where I'm hoping to enrich you, to strengthen your mindset. So would you please follow this podcast or subscribe on YouTube, hit the bell and be alerted so that you're not going to miss an episode of our time together. I also love hearing your feedback. So leave me a review or email me, send it to jeff@leveragingsuccesspodcast.com and tell me what you think of the show, what you like, what you want to hear more of. We've done it before. I'd love to do some more of your feedback as a way with which to take some topics on and talk about that. Hey, finally, I have a free offer for all of our listeners. There's a 7-part e-course in the notes. It's called Life Mastery. You'll be getting an email from me every day for 7 days, and I'm going to give you some advice on how to build a life that will matter forever. Also, if you want to go even further and get some more info on how we can work together and I can help you to build an extraordinary life, you can watch the 30-minute webinar that's in the notes. And watch that webinar, and at the end of it, you'll have an opportunity to sign up for time with me. Hey, I'm so glad that you came to be with me today, working less, making more, and taking that gain to be incredible and have an eternal impact. I'm your host, Jeff Gerhardt. Until next time, God bless you.